Wanted, anti-racist leaders. I pursued a doctorate degree later in life. I can recall being asked in the first year, "What do you want to research?" Enthusiastically, I said, "White men's fear." My chair looked at me. She was a white woman and said, "No one would participate in your study and admit his fears, even if it were anonymous." Then she asked me, why this topic? I explained that I was curious about understanding the barriers prohibiting diversity, equity, and inclusion, commonly known as DEI, and suspected that DEI initiatives remained stagnant because white leadership resisted change. Instead, I researched nonprofit boards, receptivity to diversity, and diversity management, conducting quantitative analyses. However, in 2020, during the global pandemic and protests against racism, corporate leaders recognize that the time has come. The call for anti-racist leaders is intentional and necessary to address persistent racist policies that function as standard operating procedures. Anti-racism leadership is imperative to dismantle 401 years of education, employment, healthcare, economic, and housing disenfranchisement. A clear example of the challenge is visualized in Kyle Tran Myrie, also known as Guante's words. White supremacy is not a shark. It is the water. White supremacy is the culture of racism, deeply entrenched in organizations' hiring and promotion practices, which perpetuates attitudes and behaviors that cultivate discriminatory policies and is upheld by all leaders, no matter their gender or racial identity. However, the historical predominance of white representation contradicts organizational initiatives that support diversity and inclusion policies. When we consider globally, 32 million white men hold leadership positions, with 6 million in the United States. Based on Shelton and Thomas's study, The White Men Leading Through Diversity and Inclusion, the research highlights that white men possess more than 40% of leadership positions in most companies. And that percentage increases drastically the higher the position. And the study identifies that white male leaders are less engaged with DEI than their diverse colleagues. Some leaders and boards have made bold statements pledging to improve internal DEI initiatives, expanding opportunities for Black employees, and financially supporting Black-owned businesses and communities. One such company is Microsoft, who pledged in 2020 to invest $150 million in internal diversity and inclusion efforts. $50 million will be invested in Black-owned businesses. $23 million to finance and train partners with the potential to double the number of Black employees in senior positions by 2025, and double Black-owned suppliers by 2023. $100 million toward creating a program to partner with minority-owned depository institutions, $50 million to strengthen and expand their existing justice reform initiative, and offer digital skills training to African American adults seeking new jobs. The start of a hefty investment, which totals approximately $1 billion. A clear example of measurable cultural shifts towards sustainable social changes within an organization. Also in 2020, Apple pledged $100 million for a new racial equity and justice initiative, REJI, challenging systemic barriers, outlined in their statement, which reads, "We continue to be reminded that certain uncomfortable truths about our society are ignored, silenced, and sidelined. Comfort can no longer come at the expense of change for communities of color. As global leaders in technology and business, we have an urgent responsibility to dismantle systemic racism and grow opportunities for people confronting it every day. Our EJI is a long-term effort to help ensure more positive outcomes for communities of color, particularly the Black community. We're beginning with a $100 million commitment, and our commitment will endure until there is enduring change. Apple's REJI focuses on 3 critical areas for social equity: education, greater access to knowledge opens doors; critical justice reform, liberty and justice for all; economic equity, stronger businesses, thriving communities. Other leaders started addressing racist company policies and practices, such as Grindr removed ethnic filters from their dating app. IBM will no longer sell or develop facial recognition technology. Reddit's CEO wrote an open letter committing to review and update content policy to explicitly condemn racism. And Tektron will recruit 100 Black and Latinx coders for its paid apprenticeship program, to name a few. The position of power white men hold needs to align with the values of anti-racism to make sustainable, equitable change. In the movie American Skin, the question was asked, how can any patriot ignore these killings and yet pride themselves on being a part of a great nation? Great nations are not great because they oppress, but because they liberate, not because they kill, but because they heal. Wanted anti-racist leaders require: take personal responsibility by committing to expanding your anti-racist self-knowledge. Be courageous and become proximate to what is occurring in Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities. Change the narrative. Fear and anger serve as the catalyst to oppress and enslave societal mindsets to mislead and distort. Protect your hope. Hopeless hearts complicates your life because the work is perplexed. thus challenging our dreams, wishes, and desires. Try to manage the complexities by removing racist policies and practices within your leadership roles. Be willing to be uncomfortable and inconvenienced because it is an essential requirement for changing the world. And take action. Changing circumstances requires investing in physical energy to be the difference by personally committing to anti-racist policies and practices. See these changes as an opportunity and a necessity rather than a threat. Thank you.